Well, Dr. Anna, we're so excited to have you here today. We're going to be talking about a whole host of topics. But before we go into it, I'd love to start with the basics and get your thoughts on what is happening to our body when we're going through perimenopause and then menopause.
Oh my goodness. Like, where do we start? I would like to say it's a smooth transition, but if you guys can remember back to puberty, like there's turmoil going on in your body. There's a lot of change. And perimenopause and menopause, it's also a journey, and it can last from 10 to 15 years, and if not longer, and what's happening is that our hormones start to shift really in our mid to late 20s, with losing a precursor hormone or a prohormone that makes testosterone and estrogen, and that is the hormone DHEA. So we start to see a shift in this pre-reproductive hormone. And in our 30s, we start to lose more of our ovarian hormone, predominant hormone, progesterone. And so with that decline in progesterone, we can feel more anxiety, more PMS, breast tenderness, brain fog, irritability, mood swings. And I always tell my clients, if you only hate your husband 2 weeks out of the month, it's likely your hormones, not your husband, if it's only 2 weeks. So, I mean, it's that hormone, because physiology affects our behavior. So we're getting this physiologic shift during this time period. And really because the mother hormone, progesterone, is really declining during this phase.
So you mentioned DHEA. So we talk to a lot of people who come back to us and say, my DHEA is really low, and they're pretty young, like they might be in their early 30s or something. Is that a sign that things could be headed in the wrong direction, or what's going on with that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So DHEA really is predominantly produced by our adrenal glands and our ovaries. And as we are, declining in fertility, tail ending our reproductive years, there's a natural decline in that precursor hormone DHEA. So think of it like I always think, say, where your adrenal glands are. If you make your hands in two fists and then put them around your back and you're kind of banging on your kidneys, on the top of your kidneys are the adrenal glands, and they're known as the fight and flight responders. So in times of stress, we're pumping out a lot of adrenal hormones. And so that, specifically cortisol, and cortisol can lead to a depletion in all our reproductive hormones, DHEA, testosterone, and estrogen. And so when the DHEA levels are low, I always think stress, number one, what's going on with your stress? Stress we're aware of and stress we're not aware of, right? So post-traumatic stress, adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs, that are under the surface causing a hypersympathetic physiology. So that fight and flight physiology under the surface, no matter how cool and collected, we can see them on top. So looking at heart rate variability to assess that becomes important. So think of number one, stress, and number two, hormone disruptors, toxins. Endocrine disruptors, hormone disruptors, what's coming into their food chain. Are they drinking hot coffee off of with plastic lids on it, drinking out of plastic bottles? What are they washing their clothes in? What are they using on their body, cosmetic and otherwise? So those are the two big things.
You're saying that environmental toxins can raise our cortisol. Is that right?
Environmental toxins can decrease our, interfere. They act as hormone disruptors. If they're inflammatory, and they can be pro-inflammatory, and because they're naturally competing with our body's endogenous hormone production, that can create inflammation, and that can increase cortisol. Absolutely.
Before we jumped on this, you were mentioning oxytocin, and I've heard you talk about the relationship between oxytocin and cortisol before, but let's talk about this. What is oxytocin, and why do we need it? How do we promote it, and what kind of brings it down too?
Yeah, so this is absolutely my favorite topic. So first of all, I studied as a gynecologist and obstetrician at Emory University, and I studied all the hormone pathways and reproductive pathways, and I can tell you the enzymes to make one hormone and another. I mean, I had this down. And so all my focus were on these reproductive hormones and their pathways. And what I came to recognize through my own story and through my own journey is that those are minor hormones. And that when it comes to improving the physiology of a woman, specifically women and men, but specifically women, we have to look higher up. So we have to regulate insulin and cortisol, because if they're not behaving well, none of our reproductive hormones are behaving well. And then the most important hormone in our body, which I consider the crowning hormone, the queen hormone, is the hormone oxytocin. It is a regal hormone. It is a hormone of longevity, love, and relationships and connection. And it is alkalinizing to our body. It is regenerative to our body. And it is the most powerful hormone. And I appreciate you bringing it up, because oxytocin goes to war with cortisol on a regular basis. And I never understood that until I went through it myself with our own trauma, with our, own tragedy. And then cortisol was king. It was in the lead because of post-traumatic stress disorder, because of chronic everyday stress, and pedal to the metal, hypersympathetic tone, in crisis mode, fear-based mode. When's the next bad thing going to happen, right? And so that creates this seesaw effect, and it makes sense evolutionarily, because we think if we're at war, we've got high cortisol, that is going to oppose oxytocin. So cortisol goes up and oxytocin goes down, because when you're in like that fight or flight, it's not like, oh, let me stop and help someone, or let me hug my neighbor or my enemy. That's not the hormone of fight and flight and stress, right? That's a survival hormone. So you're in this state where you're high cortisol, low oxytocin. But what happens over time, and I didn't realize this until I experienced it, what happens over time is that the paraventricular, like cortisol, is frying out your nervous system, right? It's that natural steroid, and it's, you're basically overstimulating your entire nervous system. So the paraventricular nucleus defense mechanism says, okay, I got to shut you down because you're frying me out. And so it's sometimes called this low, then you get this low cortisol, and people have misnamed it adrenal fatigue, but it's really adrenal hypofunction, because now you're in this suppressed state. It's not your adrenals can't produce cortisol. It's that you're being suppressed. So you're in this revving engine state now. And so it's like the brake is on cortisol, but what happens is oxytocin stays low at the same time. So you're in this state, this physiologic state of low cortisol and low oxytocin. And what that feels like, it's the physiology of burnout. I used to love going into my office, but I don't even want to go in anymore. I used to love going to visit my friends. I used to love my family. I don't feel love for them anymore. It's the physiology of divorce. It's the physiology of depression. That is a physiology affects our behavior, and this is the most dangerous physiology that we can deal with.
Wow, there's so much that resonates here. Actually just talking about my own personal story, I think it was like 4 weeks ago, it was a weekend, and I clearly love everything that we're doing here. And I remember looking at my husband and being like, I don't feel joy. Like, I don't feel joy seeing friends right now. I don't feel joy with work. And like, I've created this beautiful life for myself where I'm genuinely so passionate about everything we're doing that I was like, what is going on with me? And I think it kind of goes back to what you're saying. Like, I just had a really busy 2 weeks. I wasn't doing all the health protocols, and I felt low cortisol, low oxytocin, and not like myself. Like, that definitely resonates. So I'm curious, for someone who's feeling that way, that's like, Dr. Anna, I used to love going to work. I used to love being with my coworkers, or like spending time with my mom, but I just don't feel like myself. What would you say to them? What are some things that they can do starting today to kind of get out of that imbalance?
So this came to, like, this is part of what I call the keto green lifestyle, the keto green way. In my first book, The Hormone Fix, I talk about the multiple facets, and it takes more than hormones to fix your hormones, number one. But this whole, like, if we have to address the hormones top down, the most important ones to fix our physiology, we have to decrease cortisol. So we do that by getting alkalinized, focusing on alkalinizing foods, good healthy plant foods and sprouts and fermented foods and things that are minerally nutritious to our body. That's a piece of it. And the other thing is the alkalinizing behavior, the alkalinizing mindset. Toxic thoughts are acidic. Happy, joyful, grateful thoughts are alkaline. So here we have this physiologic connection now to decrease, to help regulate cortisol, to decrease the acidity that comes from being in that catabolic, revving engine state. And then manage insulin at the same time. So the low carb That's why one of the reasons I love your shake at Bio Wellness is because it's low glycemic, high fiber, good, low glycemic. So you're not pouring sugar into the bloodstream, because that's going to raise cortisol too. So we want to become insulin sensitive. So getting Keto Green accomplishes those two things. Now you're managing these very important hormones, I call them educator hormones. So you're getting insulin sensitive and you're getting alkaline. So you're managing insulin, you're managing cortisol, those two things, both with nutrition, diet, and lifestyle. So intermittent fasting, low carb, high quality protein, all of that good stuff. That's a piece of that. And then to bump out of it is, most importantly, is to start your day with oxytocin increasing behavior. So sometimes you don't feel like having sex with your partner, but play, massage, foreplay. I would say foreplay starts with bringing me a cup of coffee in the morning. I mean, that's it. That's important. So knowing what makes you happy, and and a practice, because I've been through, I've been to hell and back. So the trauma, the practice that I created that I really recognized shifted my physiology is and I do this to today, is before I open my eyes in the morning, I think of, what am I grateful for? Where did I see love yesterday? Where was I loving? Where did I feel love, right? That's question 2. And then where could I have laughed at myself or the situation more? Where did I laugh, or could I have laughed more? Those 3 questions, each one of them increase oxytocin, decrease cortisol. You are focusing on the positive. There is so much to that mindset, the attitude of gratitude, focusing on what is good. Biblically in Philippians 4, chapter 4, verse 8, it says, focus on what is, I'm going to butcher it, good, lovely, of noteworthy, beautiful, all these good things. Just focus on what is good, lovely, kind, helpful, healthy, all those things in your life. Focus on that and keep your focus on that throughout the day, so you're really seeing the good and the joy and the beautiful. You have to retrain your mind when stress physiology is trying to take over. You have to absolutely constantly renew your mind and refocus your mind on all that is good with laser focus, so that you can shift and wire your physiology and make yourself do the things that you're not feeling called to do. And those are the things that bring you pleasure, that bring you happiness. Playing with a pet, going shopping with a girlfriend, watching a funny movie. I always say my big fat Greek wedding, that's the number one way to increase oxytocin. So things like that to increase. And what I recognize as part of my journey, and this is around my late 40s, when I was going through what I call my second menopause. And I was figuring out this whole Keto Green way, and checking my urine pH. It's so easy. Just check your urine pH, check your ketones, and as I was focusing on more of a ketogenic diet, I was so acidic, and it was an aha moment to me. That's where I started adding the greens and the alkalinizers, because I knew that if my body is acidic, it's going to be breaking down muscle and bone and aging rapidly, and it can't have that. So focusing on the alkalinizer, and I recognized that the mornings I did my gratitude journaling, I did my I walked on the beach, my urine pH was more alkaline all day. So that's when I went back to the research and said, what's going on here with physiology and cortisol and oxytocin? What's the reason? What's affecting our renal physiology to actually affect that? And that's why thoughts are so important.
Wow, I definitely want to talk more about Keto Green, but first I want to hear a little bit more about your story, because you mentioned, some of the trauma that you went through. Maybe I think it was in your 40s when you went through your second menopause, but I want to kind of backtrack and have you walk us through. You're a triple board certified OBGYN. You were trained traditionally. At what point in your career did you think, man, lifestyle, everything we do, our thoughts, all of this comes into play. It all makes a difference. Can you walk us through your journey?
Oh my goodness. Yeah, no, it's, I think the first thing I realized is, I'm first generation American. I saw my mom, who's an immigrant to this country, and her 2 brothers all die before their other siblings in a war-torn area of the world. And that made me very curious. Wait, we had intervention, we had heart surgeries, we had colon surgeries, and my mother and her 2 brothers in the U.S. and the 2 youngest brothers, and my mom was a middle child, but out of 9, So they all died before several of, and in fact, 26 years ago, my mom passed away and her sister is still living. So and brother. And so like that made me look, what are we doing interventionally for our patients? And I promised my mom I would figure this out. And, it was 26 years ago when she passed away, and I wouldn't let this happen to anyone else. And then life goes on, and all of a sudden I'm on the road to, I was over 240 pounds, struggled, with depression, mood swings. I was certainly on the way to diabetes. And we had tragedy hit us, and in a tragic accident, we lost our only son, and he was just a toddler. And from there on, the grief, the trauma. I mean, literally, to hell and back, to the depths of hell. And through that, understanding a piece of that was, how do I want my children to face my daughters? I had my 3 daughters at the time. My stepdaughter and my daughters, Amanda and Amira, were 9 and 6. And how do I want them to face adversity? How do I want them to face trauma and to keep going as a result of that? And my husband and I at the time wanted to have another child very badly. And I went through, having not had trouble getting pregnant with any of my earlier children, I ended up going through round after round of the highest doses of injectable fertility meds and not having any ovarian response. And then being diagnosed by my reproductive endocrinology colleagues, best in the business, as early menopause and irreversible infertility. And potentially my only option would be egg donation, which we weren't wanting to do at the time, was not for us. And so that literally took me on a journey, healing journey, where I went around the world looking for answers. I needed to grieve in private. There was that part of it because I was in Southeast Georgia and I was a very well-known physician and am. And I needed that. I didn't want the world to continue the way it was, like nothing had changed in my life and my heart had been ripped out. And so part of that, my meditation, part of healing has always been travel, has been exploring, and I have family around the world and everyone opened their doors to us. And in some places I just explored and I learned about, herbal medicines. And this is where I learned about Maca, that's in my Mighty Maca Plus from Peru, and then about cat's claw herb and the potency of turmeric and green teas and grapeseed and all these other key ingredients that I ended up putting together. And it was just, I was just learning and I was just grieving and I was just trying to figure out. And in Peru, they would say, well, Maca helps with infertility. And they would elbow, my husband at the time and say, it's the Peruvian Viagra. So like I was joke, we're drinking some Maca there. But I couldn't stand the taste. And I'm from a family of chefs and gourmands. And so I started mixing it. Maca's good and it's rich and these super, adaptogenic qualities. What other superfoods are out there? And that's where I started to explore and experiment and which ones taste better and how I could put that together. Taste is really important. And so, we started that part of our journey, and everywhere I met someone who lost someone, serendipitously or, being vulnerable to listen and ask the questions. But I also ended up meeting like an Andean philosopher, a shaman, a Indonesian healer, and some of the world's leading scientists in gynecology and obstetrics from New Zealand and Germany. I mean, it was really just, I say God's hand was in it every step of the way. And as a result of that, I naturally reversed, with God's grace, reversed menopause and became pregnant at 41 with the child I was told I would never be able to have. And naturally, after failing round after, and you have to imagine my mind blown as a gynecologist and obstetrician who given infertility diagnosis, especially premature infertility, there's no, 38, 39, there's no reversing that. You don't talk about reversing that. And so it was fascinating to me. And so that part of the journey just, I dug in, and when I was pregnant and And I came back to my practice after my sabbatical and just wanted to give everyone the tools that I'd recognize and the hope that their diagnosis is not their destiny, right? Their diagnosis is not their destiny. Their prescription is not their description. It doesn't define them, and it's not, it's not something that they have to rely on. And that's what I want my patients. That's what I wanted women to know. I want them to take the power back over their own body. And that led me on this mission to write, to teach, to educate, to create solutions naturally. So my doctor's bag was empty. That's the short story.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that with us. That's such a journey that you've been on, and heartbreak and also beautiful at the same time. And it makes me emotional. Sorry, everyone. I'm like in my luteal phase, so I'm like on the verge of tears. But you talked about so many different things that I want to get into there. One thing that you mentioned was that your doctor diagnosed you with, was it early menopause initially? What is early menopause? And there's also premature menopause. So what are those two? What's the difference and what are the causes?
Yeah, so typically before age 40 is premature menopause. And early menopause is typically that time from 40 to 45 years old. So premature menopause was my initial diagnosis. And so that's a fine line there. The thing is, like, what we know is the average age of menopause is around age 52. Seemed like more 51 lately, plus or minus several years. Now, smokers will go through menopause earlier, age 42. Interestingly enough, women with endometriosis also go through an earlier menopause. And so you think of these hormone disruptors that are affecting our body's our natural ovarian or natural hormone production.
I heard you talk about obesogens and endocrine disruptors, and we touched on environmental toxins before, but what are obesogens?
So obesogens are basically hormone disruptors that create a metabolic dysfunction, that disturb your metabolism and create obesity by creating insulin resistance and leptin resistance. So you're hungrier more often. Like, I have a friend who's an amazing colleague and physician in the integrative health space, a leader. She's been so leptin resistant. She says, I never feel satisfied when I eat. So leptin is the hormone of satiety and ghrelin is a hunger hormone. So when you're leptin resistant, you never feel satisfied.
And I'm curious, you've mentioned throughout this interview just the power of the keto green diet, in your own life and how you're preaching that to so many of your clients. What is that? What's a keto green diet, and how is that different than conventional keto that so many of us hear about?
Yeah. So, and this is, one thing, I studied keto diet when my first daughter, my daughter Brittany, was 20. She had seizures. And so dug into understanding what's causing the seizures, but, nothing organic. So what can we do to help? And recognize that a ketogenic diet could definitely help. So this was way back in 2000, something like that. 2005, I think, was her first seizure. And so that's where I started studying keto, and I started using it in my neurologic patients, of course, low carbohydrate diets in my Candida patients. So when I was I'd lost over 80 pounds, was able to keep that off with lifestyle and habit changes that incorporated this kind of pre-keto green way. And then I hit perimenopause again, so reversed it till about age 48, and I started with the hormone swings and the physiologic shifts and the hot flashes and all of this other stuff again. And I was like, and the weight gain despite not doing anything different. That was the big one. That was the, we say the straw that broke the camel's back. Having been well over, 240 pounds and lost that weight and kept it off, and now to gain 20 pounds basically overnight without doing anything different, I was like, oh my God, I'm going to be 300 pounds before this stops. I mean, what's going on? And, really humbled me, because my patients in perimenopause, menopause would come in and say, Dr. Anna, I'm gaining 5, 10, 20 pounds and I'm not doing anything different. And of course I'd be like, well, let me check your thyroid. Let me check this. But, on the inside, I'm like, sure, you're not doing anything different. Maybe you're more sedentary, you're eating an extra protein bar or something. And so it really humbled me. And I was like, oh my gosh. So I immediately went keto. And that's when I recognized that I was very acidic. I didn't like how I felt. And I felt like I was hitting a wall. And at that point, I was a single mom because I didn't understand the cortisol oxytocin connection early enough to save my marriage. So that was a piece of it, certainly. And so so I started I was like, I did what I told my patients to do, check urine pH, because your body I didn't feel right. Men have 10 times as much testosterone as women. So keto for men is a lot easier and sustainable because they have 10 times as much testosterone, anabolic steroid. Women don't. And so we have to focus on the alkalinizers, the greens, the minerals, and the dietary habits, the intermittent fasting. That really makes a difference. So when I checked my urine pH at this point, it was as acidic as the pH paper read, meaning basically I was peeing acid. And that is inflammation. For me, that was an aha moment. And what I understood is that I needed to add the alkalinizers, the greens. And that's when I realized, as I started checking my urine pH, and I have my patients do this too, all throughout every time you go use the bathroom, find out what's making you acidic, what's making you alkaline. There are natural things that can make your urine acidic, like a good workout, but there are toxic thoughts and stress, like driving in traffic, that can make your urine acidic. And so just recognizing the pH changes and start to recognize that so you can shift your physiology and your mindset, and especially in high stress situations. And diet. So it's a nutrition and lifestyle, and that's where the keto green came around, and how I recognized the importance of alkalinizing foods and lifestyle practices in addition to getting into ketosis. Because as I recognized this, I was getting into keto just to lose weight. But as I got into the state where I was in both ketosis and in an alkaline urine pH, my brain was like on fire. Like it was alert. I was more focused. My memory was better. I was more productive. I could, I just had the peace, and also the peace that surpasses all understanding. It talks about that in the Bible. And my life was chaotic. Nothing had changed, but my physiology changed. And my physiology and my habits changed. So I could experience an internal reset, an internal peace that was just so empowering. And the reason that's so important is, and why that happens, why getting into ketosis helps the brain, especially in women in perimenopause and menopause, is because gluconeogenesis in the brain, in other words, the brain's ability to use and make glucose for fuel, is hormone dependent, estrogen, probably progesterone dependent. So as that declines, our brain is actually starving for fuel. So it wants more glucose, it wants more food, it wants more sugar, and you've got this brain fog and inflammation and aches and pains. It's like the perfect storm when you just have to shift and go into keto green, intermittent fasting, low carb, high quality protein, healthy fats, get into ketosis, check, don't guess. And then you've got this clarity, because the use of ketones for fuel in the brain will use glucose or ketones. So the use of ketones for fuel in the brain is not hormone dependent. So in this, especially in perimenopause, all those symptoms, the brain fog, the mood swings, the anxiety, the restlessness, all go away.
Wow. So this is great. And not to call out my husband, I don't think he'll listen to this, but I'm just going to call him out anyway. He was on a very sort of traditional type of keto diet for a long, long time. And I think initially he started to see like the weight come off and this, and then he hit a plateau. He got his blood work, inflammatory markers were a little bit up. And I kept telling him, like, where are all of your greens? Like, you're not eating vegetables. You're not even having any, like, a little bit of fruit here and there. You're not having any of that stuff. It's primarily like Franken keto foods, or like eggs or meat or this or that. So this is something we really worked on with him. So I want, for anybody who's listening to this, who's feeling the same way, what does a typical day on the keto green diet look like?
Yeah, and I'll tell you, and I'll also tell you that my first book is The Hormone Fix. Second is Keto Green 16. You guys can do that together. And the menu pause. Menu pause is also 5 different food plans that each pause something, because people get stuck in doing, whatever, their keto camp, their paleo camp, their vegan camp. So this is about changing it up in a very holistic food as medicine type of way. And I think that's really important to recognize. It works for a while and then you get stuck, and he's not alone, right? And so a typical day, say for example, my God, what did we had? We had our Be a Wellness shake this morning mixed with a keto green shake and a couple scoops of Mighty Maca Plus. So that was me and my daughter Amira. We had that this morning in between, like around breaking fast around 10 a.m. Again, my morning ritual, I wake up, do some type of activity, exercise after I get my daughter to school. And of course I do, before I wake up, before I get out of bed, I do my 3 questions, and then work out, have my shake. So it's a keto green shake, low carb, high in protein. Maybe added some MCT oil to it. Sometimes I'll add an avocado, and that's it. And then had for our early lunch dinner, we had filet mignon. That was on a bed of greens with tomatoes, because we have a friend who's coming. This is terrible. We have a friend who's coming to stay. I told you girls before we started, this beautiful young mom and her child are going to come stay with us for a while, and she's vegan. I'm like, girls, we're having this filet mignon. Come on. Let's cook it up and with a salad and greens. So that's a perfect keto green meal. And tonight I might eat a salad or something, or bone broth or another shake or nothing for the rest of the day. So that's typical. Two or 3 meals a day, very low in carbs. You want the diversity. So in the salad, there's the broccoli sprouts. There's sometimes we'll use sauerkraut or kimchi or vinegar and olive oil as the dressing. So you're thinking fermentation, salt, fat, protein. And that's a really good combination to have together.
And would you make any changes for women in their reproductive years based on like kind of what you laid out? Would you recommend that, or would you recommend anything a little bit differently for those in that phase?
So really this is for any age. So, I have a house full of women, so I can put them on keto green, but their premenstrual time period, that's more carbs. That's when you want to add your sweet potatoes, add some legumes. You can carb up during that time too. And again, there's the whole flexibility. I always say it's 10% fasting, 80% keto green, and 10% feasting. Although again, house of gourmands and chefs, and we may do 20 to 30% feasting. So we've got that down. Listening to your body and become in tune with it. And I think that's where women have been severely mismanaged, is by not recognizing the natural menstrual cycle and how it affects them. And it's important to really be in tune with that.
Absolutely. I want to talk a little bit more about Maca for anyone who's not familiar with it. It's a part of your keto green. Is it a powder?
It's part of my Mighty Maca Plus powder.
Mighty Maca Plus powder. Okay, what is Maca? Who is it for? Are there people who should stay away from it, and how can it be used?
Yeah, so I've never used Maca just by itself because, number one, I couldn't stand the taste, and so I'd created this formulation as part of my journey around the world. But part of that healing journey was in Peru, and when I was in Peru, they would say, you're infertile, drink Maca, right? And hence it's the Peruvian Viagra, so we're drinking some Maca. And it was used by the ancient Incans. It only grows at high altitude. So the high altitudes in the Andes, and it's like a root, essentially, like, in the tuber family, but it's actually in the cruciferous vegetable family. So right away, you think cruciferous vegetables, good breast health, good hormone balancing. And so Maca is in that family. And it was used by the ancient Incan warriors to give them strength and stamina as they went into battle. So it was one of their very healing foods, and Peruvians are very proud of it. Low breast cancer rates, really good fertility rates. Maca is one of those superfoods, and it has its own proteins called macaines that are unique. It's rich in arginine. Arginine increases your body's natural production of nitric oxide, which increases blood flow, which is how Viagra works, hence the name Peruvian Viagra. It's part of the composition. It is an adaptogenic, like adrenal adaptogen, genetic adaptogen. So when you're in high stress or completely exhausted, it will help. It really does help support you in balance. And what we've seen with the combination, again, because I use this clinically in my practice, we would see with Mighty Maca Plus an increase in DHEAS, which is your adrenal hormone, by as much as 70 to 200% in 2 months, taking 2 to 3 scoops a day. I mean, that is significant. There was no other adrenal protocol that I used that gave those results. So I think it's the combination. My Mighty Maca Plus is 30 superfoods, and it's a combination of the different macas, just like they grow in the fields in Peru. And so that's how I started with it, and that's how I use it in this combination. So I think, like with anything, who shouldn't use it is to trust your body's response to it. For some women, if they have PMS, it really helps balance that out, because we see a natural improvement in progesterone with using Mighty Maca Plus. So we have increased fertility with increased levels of progesterone as well. And so we've got lots of Mighty Maca babies and beautiful testimonies around that. And but you have to see how your body responds to it in general. So for some women who are really estrogen sensitive, then they may notice a little more, depends on how much they're taking it, they may notice a little more sensitivity premenstrually, but that is very rare. So I would say always listen to your body. And what I've really dug into breast health research around Maca and found it to be very, very safe and very beneficial.
How about for somebody who has high DHEA or PCOS?
Yeah, so definitely good for PCOS because of the adaptogenic nature and the ability to detox. So in my Mighty Maca Plus, there's milk thistle, there's greens, there's flaxseed, there's enzymes, there's, plant extracts and fruit extracts. So there's a combination of things. It's not just by itself. So I can see improvements in insulin sensitivity with it. So that's and glucose control. So in that way, the combination is really beneficial. But again, I never use straight maca.
And I have a question. We keep saying the word adaptogen. For someone who's listening, they're like, Dr. Anna, what is an adaptogen? Can you kind of share a bit more about the magic behind it?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So when we use the word adaptogen, it means like that ability to adapt. You're adapting to a change, you're adjusting. And so when we talk about genetic adaptogens like turmeric, quercetin, resveratrol, they have an adaptogenic effect too. So the same with maca. When we use this term, it means that whether it's whether you're in overdrive or underdrive, or whether you are predisposed to a certain genetic pathway or not, it's a great leveler. It's like leveling or evening out the playing field type thing, if you think of it that way. That's the best way I can describe it.
I love that. And what would you say? I know maca is like the superstar, and I'm excited to get your maca and have it every day now. What would you say are maybe the second or third of your favorite adaptogens that you would recommend to clients or anyone listening?
Oh my God, definitely turmeric. Hands down, turmeric. I love turmeric. I love to cook with it. I love the smell of it. I love the flavors of it. I just love turmeric. And the other one, not necessarily considered an adaptogen, but it absolutely is garlic. Oh my gosh, you think about this. You think about this more of a medicinal food, garlic. Think, who was the first person who saw this smelly, vegetable in the ground and thought, okay, let's use this, right? It was definitely a medicinal food. And I think garlic is just genius. It's genius. So I would put that in the field, but yeah. So I would put that in my favorites in general. But is it really an adaptogen? I don't know.
Well, luckily I love all three of those things. So
so good.
Yeah, so good. I want to kind of go a little bit more into perimenopause and menopause, because I think these are times where women can kind of feel like almost suddenly, sometimes not suddenly, things change. Their sex drive goes down, their hair changes, their weight changes, their sleep changes. It just feels like maybe they don't feel like themselves. And I kind of want to know, what can they do at this time to really reclaim their vitality, reclaim their sexual health? Because it doesn't have to be so horrible, right?
No, no, absolutely. And I think it's that whole thing is like, I have this card that I put in packages sometimes, and it says self-love is your highest frequency. And self-care and self-love go hand in hand. And when we're in perimenopause, so many of us are wearing many hats. We're wearing our mom hat, friend hat, partner hat, boss hat, whatever it may be, right? We have so many hats that we're wearing, and then our buckets are emptying out rapidly. And so when we are not interested, when we are feeling disconnected, that's a first red flag that oxytocin's low. So like self-care, self-love is to give yourself, do things that you enjoy doing, is to reflect on that. And especially when it comes to sexual health. I mean, our sexuality and sexual pleasure is a way we increase oxytocin. And when we're like saying no more often than yes, then we have to, and we're in a good relationship. We love our partner, and that's part of it. So I think that's important to step back and say, well, what's going on? What are the reasons that I'm disconnected, or I don't have desire? And I lecture on this. I lecture on women's sexual health, and have trained physicians around the world on this topic because it's so important to quality of life for women, and it's so ubiquitous. 70% of women have considered a low sex drive or decrease in libido or issues with libido. And so what it comes down to is three things. It's either certainly issues of desire, what's going on with desire, disconnect, relationship disconnect can be physiologic versus the relationship strife, and it can be discomfort. If you have discomfort every time you do something, why would you want to do it? So whether it's from dryness or from a bad episiotomy or from urinary infections or vaginal odor after having sex, I mean, all those are negative feedback on why we'd want to, why would we want to have sex if we have that every time? And it's so true, and especially perimenopause, menopause, and beyond. And it's really want women to know that there's something we can do for all three of those reasons, for all three of those issues. It's why I created my product Julva, which is my over-the-counter cream for the vulva, and it's the first vulvar cosmetic ever made, and so important for vulvar health and physiology and sexual health. So because it naturally restoring, naturally anti-aging, naturally restoring your moisture, comfort, sensitivity, and orgasm. That's powerful, but also helps with continence and that bladder leaking that can happen I delivered 4 big babies. I know all of this personally and professionally. And, when my doctor's bag was empty, I needed to find something to fix it. So that's part of it. And those are things that can disrupt a woman's receptivity to sexual intimacy and pleasure in perimenopause and menopause. And then the whole thing that we talked about with oxytocin and cortisol, that connection issue. Now, it can be physiologic and not relational, but we have to fix it. And then the whole desire. There are many reasons. And I created a program called Sexual CPR, very holistic program, very fun name, Sexual CPR, to bring your, life back into your sex life. And it's multifactorial when we look at desire. And, is it medications that we're on, like antihistamines, for instance, can completely dry you up and decrease your desire. Antidepressants, same thing. And so looking at those three areas, desire, disconnect, and discomfort, those are typically the three things that we need to address. And we're worth it. We need to address that. We're worth investigating it, worth spending time. Our families, our relationship, our own self-love and appreciation and worthiness of joy and pleasure it's just so good. It's worth it. We are worth it.
So beautiful. I'm just so impressed by you, Dr. Anna, just everything that you've created to just support women. I'm so excited. We're definitely going to include all of this in the show notes. And I have a random question that just comes to mind as you're speaking. You talk about your life before you went on your journey and had all this trauma and kind of discovered this new way of living. And you were back then a conventional OBGYN. Like, when you came back as this new person, back into your old clinic, seeing your own patients, but you had this whole different perspective, did people think like, where did you go? Like, are you crazy? Because I just love hearing OBGYNs like you speak this way because everything is so holistic and interrelated. So did people think like you just lost it back in the day?
Oh my gosh, yeah. And I was already a little on the edge because I was already an osteopathic physician, but trained at Emory. And I would do deliveries in very dark light, very dim light. I'm like, there's no sense in shocking a baby's nervous. So I already labored my patients. That was unheard of, like ridiculous stuff that was happening in our small Georgia town, industrializing maternity and labor and delivery. It's terrible. But it definitely with supplementation, with bioidentical hormones, I got a lot of criticism. And but that's okay. I always say, I've been to hell and back. You can't fuck with me,
I feel really passionately about women who want to get pregnant being able to get pregnant. It's something that I just think about and care about deeply. And I want to ask you, if there's anybody who's listening who was told the same thing that you were told, that they can't have kids, they can't have babies, like you're headed into menopause, there's unexplained infertility, there's really not much we can do. What would you say to them?
There's always hope. First things first is we have to understand why. What's the underlying reason? Because there's a reason. Our bodies are designed to carry pregnancy. Like what's going on? What's the hormone disruption? What is there a physical issue that we need to address? What's going on? And then I would say, if that's your hope, that's your heart, don't let anyone tell you differently. But create a body that is optimum for pregnancy. Create the healthiest body you can create, and open yourself up with your thought, your mind, your spirit to that loving connection. And in one way or another, you will receive it. Maybe not the traditional way through your own, maybe, but in another way, someone becomes your own. And I've seen that over, and I'm just going to cry thinking about some of the people that, I've seen these miracles happen. So you have to create a body that is open, welcome, and loving to this new soul. And one way or another, you will receive it.
That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that.
That's so beautiful. I'm going to shift and kind of talk about one thing that comes a lot with our customers at BIA, especially those that are in perimenopause and menopause, is hot flashes. We hear this quite a bit, and women are just complaining. What are causing hot flashes? And from your perspective, what are some things that we can do that maybe we haven't touched upon yet? I know we talked about a lot already to help with specifically hot flashes.
Yeah, definitely. There's a few things. One of the things that I recognized, like in doing my Magic Menopause program, which I launched in 2014 online, because I'd gone through menopause and then reversed it again for the second time with my Keto Green Way. So I brought that online. And patients, women, the clients, customers, I never prescribed for them or anything. They were following the Keto Green Way and say, Dr. Ann, I've been dealing with hot flashes for 10 years and now they're gone completely. In 2 weeks, they're completely gone. And a couple things that we were doing was certainly the Keto Green. So you're becoming more insulin sensitive. And I had them on Mighty Maca. It's part of the Magic Menopause program and my Keto Green shake. So there was supplementation there. And so I dug into the research. I'm like, insulin's got to have something to do with hot flashes. And sure enough, there's so much research that looked at that. Insulin resistance is associated with unrelenting hot flashes, independent of estrogen loss. So that insulin resistance increases hot flashes. So that's one of the things that, it's so important to understand that's why, the Keto Green lifestyle. And then Mighty Maca, I think because it's adaptogenic, it has flaxseed, maca, and other superfoods in there, that helps with hot flashes too. We've used it in breast cancer patients that couldn't take anything else. And so the combination's really powerful to get rid of hot flashes. And then sometimes we still need estrogen on board. We need progesterone, estrogen, DHEA, menopause and postmenopausally.
Well, I'm definitely going to go to your website and order your products after this. Especially the Maca one. I'm excited about that.
Oh, you'll love it. You'll love it. I'm going to send you guys some, and we'll have a free trial link. Just pay a small amount for shipping and handling. So we'll send that to you guys too.
Amazing. Well, thank you, Dr. Anna, for jumping on and chatting with us about this. I know it's going to help so many women, so we super appreciate you.
My pleasure. Thank you for all you're doing. Loved being here with you ladies. You've got great hearts. Thank you.
Right back at you.